Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great and that you're following the 3H's of the channel. In this video, it's all about strange encounters at national parks. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, pull up a stump and let's get into it. Thank you for watching. A weird thing happened to me about 21 years ago, and I never really told anybody about it. I was around 27 to 28 years old. I was between jobs and I had some money saved up, so I was out traveling and hiking, camping, and fishing my way around the Pacific Northwest. I was essentially doing the van life thing before it was ever a thing, and this incident happened in BC, Canada. I was driving through a scenic national park. It was this kind of area that every 20 miles or so, it had a picnic area or a point of interest to stop at. It was 2:15 p.m. I pulled into one of these areas on the right of the highway and I had a look around. It was the really cool trailhead of this really long hiking trail. There were a few people around it that had also stopped. I pulled out to the right again in the direction that I was going, and after about 20 more miles, I started to feel really strange, almost like I had been drugged. It was like getting stoned off your ass, basically. I felt extremely lightheaded, and then tunnel vision began to set in. It wasn't like I blacked out or anything, it was just this super weird feeling that's hard to describe, but I remember it. I looked at the clock. It said 2:17, which made no sense. Suddenly, on the left was a point of interest. It was a stop at the same name as the last one, but this time on the left instead of the right. So I pulled into the spot, and then I noticed that it's an exact mirror image of the one that I had just stopped at. All of the people were the same. The guy walking to the porta potty, his car, the couple with the same dog on the same grass, calling the dog by the same name, the same Winnebago parked in the lot. Everything was exactly the same, except it was in reverse or mirrored and on the other side of the highway. I was super creeped out and disturbed by this. I got in my van and left again. And to add to it, the time when I got in the van was now 2:15 again. I don't remember how long I drove, but eventually, everything seemed to begin to feel normal again. It has to be the most bizarre experience I've ever had. I was camping at Kings Canyon National Park in California back in 2013. I had been there a few times, but this time I took a trail that I wasn't familiar with, and I tried to be gung-ho about it, despite it going on for absolutely ever. Now this trail wasn't marked very well the further I got. Eventually I realized that I had somehow ended up following a deer trail instead. I tried to go back the way I came, but then I realized how similar everything looked, and while I could remember recent things, I had been off trail for a long time. Probably one of the scariest moments of my life was trying to find the way back while it was starting to get dark. I kept trying to find the trail with my flashlight, but basically stayed lost until I gave up for the night and sat down. I didn't really sleep most of the night because I didn't have my tent, or anything for that matter. All of it was back at the campground, but eventually I must have passed out. At some point, I remember waking up, but feeling paralyzed, like I couldn't move, and around me were a group of these things just staring at me. I remember being momentarily panicked, like a full-on heart ice cold and panic freaked out kind of feeling. But then as I met their eyes, I felt a weird calmness, and I started noticing that they just looked exceptionally beautiful, like otherworldly beautiful, and I started feeling really content, like everything was going to be okay. I don't remember what happened next, but then I wake up. I'm on the side of the road on the highway. I was able to flag somebody down to drive me back to the campground after that. I know that whatever these things were placed me there, and I wanted to see them again, but I've never had an encounter like that since. I find out later that these beings are called Lyrans, and I think they're extraterrestrial. So I saw something weird while we were camping at Shenandoah National Park. It's been about 10 years, but I still remember it very clearly. I was there with my now ex-girlfriend and 3 other friends. The day started with a 6-hour hike that went pretty deep into the woods. At some point near the end of our hike, we set up our tent. We have a good time just camping. We went fishing. We told ghost stories around the campfire. We had s'mores. It was basically just like a camping scene from a movie. We all go to our tents and me and my girlfriend start making out. And then I hear a branch snap about 50 yards away. My girlfriend gets freaked out and tells me to go check it out. The guy at the entrance had told us about bears and said it would be best to put all of our stuff in smell-proof containers or probably high up in trees, to discourage the bears from going near your campsite. I checked the noise with a flashlight, but I don't see any bear. In fact, I don't see a whole lot of anything. And as I'm searching around, I do find something weird. It looks like a small circle with a weird orange liquid in it. It's making this weird symbol. I almost stepped in it if I wasn't watching. I look up in the trees after I hear some leaves move, and I see this weird twinkle, like a reflection from eyes. I'm slightly creeped out, but there's nothing happening and there's no bear, so I just go back to my tent. I don't tell my girlfriend because I still want her to be in the mood. So I continue doing business with my girlfriend, but then around 2 a.m. I hear something else. I hear my friend's tent unzip. I poke my head out to check what it is, and all I can make out is a shadow, but it looks incredibly weird. I call out my friend's name. I say, "Hey, is that you?" And the shadow immediately freezes and then slinks back into the darkness in a single instant. I run out of my tent with my flashlight, shining it all around, and then I see something running off in the distance, and upon looking at it, it looked exactly like your stereotypical reptilian, but it had a huge tail and was running on 2 legs while carrying something. I, of course, didn't sleep for the rest of the night, and as soon as sunrise came, I woke him up and asked if he was okay. He said he was, but he had this weird dream that something was trying to get into his tent, and weirdly enough, one of his shirts were missing. It was just very strange, and I hope I don't ever have to see that thing ever again. That morning we packed up and we hiked back out without incident, but I felt weird the whole way, like I was being observed. I don't know if any of the others felt it, but I also never told them what I saw that night. So all of this happened when my friend Daniel came to visit me and my brother in Arizona. He planned to be out here for a week. We decided that we should do 2 nights of camping since he's never been camping in Arizona. We decided to camp at Rustler Park Campground in the Chiricahua Mountains. We know the mountain range is one of the 2 missing 411 hotspots in Arizona. We go anyway, thinking what's the worst that could happen, and just kind of for the thrill of it all. The day comes where he lands at the airport. Me and my brother pick him up, and we head out to the highway with all of our supplies that we had packed before arriving at the airport. We spend some time driving down the highway, just shooting the shit and talking. Eventually, we take the exit that the GPS tells me to. I follow this road for maybe an hour or so. The road eventually leads to the first foothills of the chain, and we begin ascending. The road turns into a dirt road quite quickly, not the best conditions for my minivan, which worries me. As we ascend, we can see people along the way in different campsites. I wonder why they don't camp higher up. I spend another hour or so driving upwards on this winding dirt road where there's always a cliff to my left. It's still about 3 or 4, so we're not too worried about nightfall. Eventually, we make it, and I see the campground sign. We pass the sign and I start assessing the campground. There's only one person, a guy camping in his trailer behind his truck, in the whole campground that could fit at least 50 people. I think that's odd, since it's a Friday afternoon. But then I think to myself, well, maybe since it's Memorial Day weekend that's coming up, people are just going to come next weekend instead. I notice a building called a guard shack that's just marked on it, not a real sign, but there's no car anywhere near it. We think, alright, I guess it's just my group and this other guy in the whole campground. We drive past him, and he waves back. He seems normal, so we think nothing of this. We decided on a spot further up the road and around the hill behind the trailer guy so that we were out of his sight. By the time we set up camp, we're all hungry, so we get to cooking. Everything is cool, except for the fact that it's extremely windy, like the strongest wind I've ever encountered in my life. I conclude that it must be just this area, and that's why people aren't camping up here. After all, the campground's elevation is like 9,000 feet. The wind makes the cooking extremely difficult, so we have to settle on snacks for now. We spend the rest of the night just chilling and smoking, just catching up on life and stuff. Eventually, we go to bed. The wind makes it kind of hard to sleep that night, but I somehow manage, given how crazy it was. When we wake up the next day, we start to cook breakfast. It's still pretty damn windy, so it made the cooking difficult again, but we get it done. We made breakfast burritos, if you're curious, and we start to talk about the hike that we're going to do. My brother volunteers to stay at the camp and watch over everything, since he's not too athletic and is not the hiking type. Me and Daniel start prepping our backpacks for the hike. 15 minutes before we head out, a car pulls up to us, and it's this older guy in his Jeep. He asks us if we know where the trail starts around here. I tell him that maybe the guard at the shack knows. He says thanks and drives off. I realize that there's probably not even a guard there, since there's no car around, but I also think that he should be fine. Eventually, we head out for our hike. As we're walking away from our campsite, we decide to head to the guard shack since we think that the trailhead may be somewhere around there. But then we see the older guy, all the way down the road near the campground entrance. We wonder exactly what he's doing, and then we realize that he's actually found the start of the trail. We figure that we should do the same, since we want to get started, and we aren't totally sure if there's a trailhead near the guard shack at all. We start heading in the direction and start hiking the trail. We catch up to the guy, do some small talk. I think he said that there's no guard there, but if I'm honest, I don't remember the full conversation for sure. We say our goodbyes, and we hike ahead since we have a much better pace than him. Our goal is to reach what's called Chiricahua Peak. The round trip comes in around 8 to 10 miles-ish, but I don't remember exactly. We hike for 2 to 3 hours, and everything is cool and pretty normal for a missing 411 spot. I don't exactly know what we were expecting. It's still really windy though. At one point, in fact, the wind gets so strong that when we reach this opening in the forest, I actually had to squat down and cover my face. I'm thinking to myself, this wind is nuts. I start to consider if the strength of the wind and its frequency may be paranormal. But then I shrug it off and think to myself, dude, you've just been browsing the internet too much, you've been watching too many of those videos. It's wind. You're on a mountain. Eventually, we get to this 5-way intersection on the trail. I'm trying to figure out where to go based on the signs, but it's kinda unclear. Some of the signs are broken, some of them aren't marked properly. I notice 100 yards behind us on the trail, next to the one where we came from, is the older guy. Me and Daniel are confused, since we were thinking, how did he catch up to us so fast? He approaches us, and we ask him how he caught up with us. He tells us how on the trail that we took, you can take one of the side trails to reach a dirt service road and use it as a huge shortcut. I think, well, that makes sense to me. I ask him if he knows how to get to Chiricahua Peak. He says he doesn't know, but he plans to go to Fly Peak since it's 2 miles closer and basically the same elevation. I talked to Daniel about this, and he agrees with me that we should do the same since we're getting kinda tired. I also forgot to mention that the entire time, this older guy is carrying a monocular on a tripod, which explains why he wants to get to the peak. He probably wants to get some good views or for photography or something. We assess the signs again, which are, like I said, crooked and broken, but we discern which trail leads to Fly Peak. It's about a mile away. We tell the older guy that we'll see him up there and head on upwards. The trail gets really steep and wraps around the peak. At some point, we lose sight of the older guy behind us and continue on. We eventually make it to the top and are pretty tired. We're looking around and see a makeshift fire pit. Further away, down where the trail ends, I see a group of boulders. We decide that we should go over there and chill, which was a mistake. I'm thinking that maybe we can find a spot that blocks the wind from hitting us. And yes, the wind is still really strong. It's around 4 at this point. As we approach, I heard a sound. All of a sudden, it was like a mechanical sound, I think. I'm confused since I'm thinking to myself that there's nothing in the forest that makes a sound like that. Daniel notices I've stopped and I'm looking around. He asks what's up. I ask him if he heard that. He said he didn't, and I look around some more and assess the situation. Everything seems good. Maybe I'm just being nervous. I decide to pull up my oil pen and relax once we find a nice spot amongst the boulders. Once we do, we sit down and we are having a good time for about 10 minutes. But then all of a sudden, as I'm standing there, my ears pick up a sound, and it's a sound that this whole thing revolves around. It sounds like several children chattering and laughing amongst one another, but it had this muffled nature to it, like the sounds were underwater almost. I think, well, how can that be? There's no water around here. Another thing that's bothering me is the volume of the sound. It's not that loud, but it's loud enough where I should be able to at least see where it's coming from. I'm scanning the trees, looking around, but I don't see anything. I think I'm just being nervous once again. Maybe it's just the wind making sounds. I shrug it off. I also don't want to sketch out Daniel. I keep puffing on the pen, trying to relax, but there's an issue. The sound is still occurring and won't stop. I start thinking to myself, alright, there's something not right here. There's no one else out here besides myself, Daniel, and this older guy. I know this because from where the campsite is, I can see the entrance of the campground, and no one else has entered besides that guy, and there's no way they hiked up here that fast. Also, the sounds sound like children, so how would they be out here? It's like 3 hours to sunset. Why would they be out here? And that's when I had a realization. I'm in a mountain range that's classified as one of the 2 missing 411 hotspots in Arizona. I'm literally sitting on a granite boulder, and sunset is near. I realize the sounds may be Faye observing myself and Daniel. I think, shit, we should not be out here. I tell Daniel that maybe we should head back since sunset is soon. I notice that he hasn't said anything about the sounds. I'm thinking, maybe I'm just imagining it. Maybe he just didn't hear it, like that weird mechanical noise. All those internet stories are making me paranoid. As we head back toward the trail, I notice that the older guy has left. I shrug it off that I just want to get out of here. Daniel takes the lead and we reach the trail. As we march on, I hear thuds behind me, like a coconut hitting the ground or something like that. I'm so on edge, I do a 180-degree turn and instantly look and see if I can catch anything. Nothing at all. I'm still nervous though, but I keep pressing on. We reach that 5-way intersection, and up ahead, we see the older guy. He tells us that he never made it to the peak and he just quit halfway. But then who the hell did we see up there? We follow the trail that he took, since it probably leads to that service road that he mentioned. We follow the trail, but we have to take a break at one point, since he's somehow getting ahead of us, and we're getting really tired at this point. We just continue hiking toward the campground, or the direction we think it's in, for like 2 miles. It turns out the service road does lead right back to the campground. As we reach the end of the road, we see the older guy in his car driving off way in the distance. It seems weird how he got there that fast and got that far ahead of us. We get back to the campsite and greet my brother. I decide not to say anything about what happened since I don't want to freak anyone out. And at this point, I still think that I may have just been hearing things. We try to cook dinner, but the wind is getting even stronger than it was the other night. It's hitting our fire pretty hard and sending embers everywhere. My tent is almost sideways at this point, and our chairs need to have rocks on them just so they don't get blown away. I can't cook at all since the wind is so crazy. We decide to just pack everything up and evac out of there since the wind is just nuts. We spend 20 minutes throwing everything into my minivan and just get out of there. We realize that going down a one-way dirt road in the middle of the night on some random mountain may not be the best idea. I check the map on my phone. It seems like there's another road to the east out of here. I realize that the guy with the truck and trailer couldn't have just taken the road that I took since it was so narrow and had tight turns. I conclude that he must have taken the road to the east, and I head that way. I spend the next 2 hours slowly driving through a bumpy-ass unmaintained road in the dead of the night in a minivan. Eventually, we come out the other side of the mountain chain and have to pass through New Mexico to get back on the highway. 3 hours later, we make it back to my place. We're all really tired, so we go to bed. The next morning, I'm talking to them about the camping trip. I mentioned to my brother how I heard some weird shit on Fly Peak. Daniel butts in and says, "Oh, you heard those sounds too." And I said, "Daniel, didn't you say you heard nothing when I asked you back up there?" referring to the mechanical noise that I heard. And he said he didn't hear that, but he heard something after that. I asked him what he heard. He said it sounded like children laughing or talking, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. My mind blue screens. I say, "Daniel, you're not screwing with me, are you?" He says I'm not, and that he didn't mention it at the time because he was just thinking that he was hearing stuff. I tell him that I heard the exact same thing and didn't mention it for the same reason. We're all kind of confused and freaked out about this revelation, at least I am anyways. They just shrug it off after a few minutes and kind of laugh about it. Later on, I do some research. Turns out there's missing persons cases on that mountain range. A park ranger named Paul Fugate who went missing back in the 80s at the north section of the mountain range, specifically at the Chiricahua National Monument. Jerry Hayes, a 5-year-old boy who went missing in 1938 from his parents' hunting camp. His body was found 3 miles away near Rucker Canyon. But it's the last two that weirded me out the most. Janet Castrillon and Lawrence Costin. Janet went missing in June of 2015 when she and her family were camping at Rustler Park. Lawrence went missing in September of 2015 at Rustler Park after he went for a hike with his cat. I keep thinking to myself, if I knew this information beforehand, I wouldn't have gone camping out there. And then I realized that me and my friend could have been the next on the list of missing people. I'm much more careful about where I camp now. So what did you think of those strange encounters? Do you have one of your own? I have an email in the description below that you can send it to if you'd like to, and if one of these in the video stuck out to you, let me know which one it was down in the comments. Also down there are links to donate to the channel, a PayPal, and a Patreon. And if you liked the video, be sure to like and subscribe, it helps the channel. And I'll put another couple of videos up here if you want to watch something else, or rewatch a video that you've seen before. And on a more personal note, as somebody who's grown up in the woods and recognizes signs and all that stuff, I'm not gonna go and camp anywhere that is a missing 411 hotspot. That's just a hard no for me. But yeah, I hope you liked the video, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump with me. I hope you have a good week, and I'll see you Friday.